What's going on, you guys, and welcome back to the channel. So if you've been following along with this series, then you'll know in the last video we created our endpoints for creating a user, generating a token so when the user logs in, and also just retrieving the user. So as a quick refresher, I've got the FastAPI server up and running, and the first thing that we can do is in the authorized top right corner, we can click on that and then just log in. So I've already got a user called Harry with the email at hogwarts.com and then password just string, authorize. And yeah, so this works. We get the logout option as well, but I'm just going to click X. But now you can see like the lock icon is like completely locked, and we can get back the user. So try that out, execute, and we can get the user. We can also try this endpoint out if you want. You can try it out by just passing in the username and password, or the email in our case. And also, if you're new to this video or new to this series, the code base is, the GitHub link is in the description. So feel free to go ahead and clone it. But so in this video, we're going to focus on the CRUD side of the application. So the create, read, update, and delete. And that's going to be for our leads. And our leads is basically like a contact book. This whole thing is just really a glorified contact application that we'll be creating in the end. So head back over to the code. So hopefully you have something similar to this, but to just also get an idea of what a lead is. A lead basically has, of course, the ID, the owner ID, so the person who creates it. So the person who signed in creates a lead, and that lead will be associated with that user. And then the first name of the lead, let's say, I don't know, you have, what's another Harry Potter contact? Let's say Dumbledore. So you'll have like first name Albus, last name Dumbledore, and then email, the company, a little note that you can add alongside it, along with the date created and date last updated. So we'll be creating our API endpoints for our leads around this model. So actually one thing I just want to do before we jump into this. So if we go back to our create user endpoint that we did in the last video, what I want to do is, or the way in which I want this app to work is that when a user registers, they'll be authenticated automatically. So they'll be logged in straight away. And so what we can do instead here is we can say await. So we can create the user and we can just go ahead and return that the token for it. So we can do return await underscore services dot create token based on that user. Just pass in the user like that. But yeah, that was just one small change I forgot to add in the last video. But yeah, so let's continue. So the first endpoint I want to create is the create lead endpoint, so the post endpoint. And so what we can do is say app.post, and the URL will be API/leads, like so. And then we can say the response model will be that of a lead, so schemas.lead. And what we want in the kind of the parameters for it, so we can make this an asynchronous endpoint, and we can call this create underscore lead. And what we want is the lead itself, so that will be schemas.lead create, and the user, so the user will be underscore schemas.user, so that's the type, and then we can set a default to it, so underscore FastAPI depends, and then underscore services dot get current user. So that will get the current authenticated user. And finally, we just want the database session. So db underscore orm dot session, that's the type, and then underscore FastAPI dot depends. And within there, we can say services dot get underscore db. And we can just say pass like that. So yeah, that's the endpoint. If we head back to the browser, we'll see that we have this post create leads. It doesn't do anything, but it does know what it will take. So it'll take a first name, last name, email, company, and note. And that's because we've said the lead itself that we're passing in is lead create. And if we just look at that for a second, lead create inherits from lead base, and it doesn't do anything extra. So it just takes in first name, last name, email, company, note, just like we have here. So to do what the thing we need to do next is actually create a service that allows us to create a lead. So back in services, we can go ahead and create our function, and we'll say this is going to be called create lead. So this will be an asynchronous function. Say create underscore lead. This will take a user, which is again schemas.user. The database session is underscore orm.session, and the lead itself. So lead, which will be lead create. So the first thing we can do is say lead equals underscore models dot lead, and we can unpack the lead itself. So we can say asterisk 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 and then lead, then dot dict, like so. So it just unpacks it's basically like saying user first name equals lead dot first name, last name equals lead dot last name, but this is just like a shortcut for it. And we can set the owner ID to the user dot ID, just like that. And then we can do db dot add and throw in the lead, and then db dot commit. And then finally, we can just refresh the database on the lead itself. And then finally, just like we have here, this from ORM, we can say return schemas dot lead dot from ORM, and then just throw in the lead like that. Now back in main.py, we can go ahead and use that function. So all we really need to do is, instead of just replacing that pass statement with return await because it's asynchronous, and then services dot create lead, and we can say the user equals user, the database equals the database, and the lead equals lead. So now we can go ahead and check it out. So if we refresh, so we're not authorized right now, so we can't really access this create leads. If we try it, let's say we try it out, we pass in first name being, say, Bob, builder, email bob@builder.com, company, let's just leave that there. There's no point filling that out. We execute that now. We get this error message 401 saying not authenticated, and that's because we're not signed in. So let's sign in. So let's authorize. I'm going to do harry@hogwarts.com, password. And now what we can do is, so we get this is now locked. So that means, we can send something. So in our request body, we can say, let's actually give it like, I don't know, building company notes, call about new home. So now if we execute this, we get back so we get a 200 response code saying that, yeah, everything worked out fine. And we get the response body. So if you remember, we said our response will just be the lead itself. And that includes the first name, last name, email, company, the owner ID. So the user you use to create this lead, along with date created and date last updated, which by default is set to the current time. So now that we have this, we can go ahead and create our other endpoints. So the next thing is to create a function that returns all our leads. So we can say app.get, and the endpoint is API, and then just leads again. And this will be a list. So we can say response model equals list. So make sure you import list from typing. So just do this from typing, import list. And then what we can do is just say it will be a list type, say schemas.lead. And then we can say async get underscore leads. And this will take in, it won't take in a lead itself because, you know, we're not sending any information there, but it will take in the authenticated user along with the database. Instead of typing it in, I'm just going to copy that and then just paste it here. And then just to fill it in, we can say pass. So yeah, now let's go ahead back into services. And before we actually create a function that returns our leads, actually, no, let's save that for later, but let's go ahead and write our get leads function. So just ignore what I just said then. Async get underscore leads, not capital, leads, like that. And then that will take in a user. And let's just copy this, what we had for create lead. So just paste that in here. But what we don't want is this lead parameter here. So we can just get rid of the argument. So to get the leads, we can say leads equals models dot lead. And then, oh, sorry, not models dot lead. We want db dot query. Oops. So we're going to query the database. And the database we want, or the table that we want to query is the lead table, and we want to filter it by the owner itself. So we can say owner ID has to match the user, so the current user that's logged in, that user's ID. And then finally we can return a list, but that list is going to map each of our leads. So we're going to use the map function. If you're not familiar with it, definitely recommend reading up about it because it can be very useful in cases like this. So we're going to map the schemas.lead.fromORM, and we're going to chuck in every lead in there. So basically what this does is saves us from writing a for loop where we have to go through each lead, create a, it's basically like doing this here, like from ORM, but in a for loop. So it will loop through all of these leads, throw them in, like turn them into a lead schema object, add them to a list. But here it just allows us to do it in one line, which is, yeah, very convenient. So yeah, so return a list of our leads that are obviously schema objects. But yeah, this is our get leads. And back in our main.py, what we can do now is just make use of that. So if I remember correctly, this is asynchronous. So we can just say return await, and then services.get leads. And we can pass in the user as being the user, and the DB, the database session being just the database. So now we can go ahead and check that out. So if I just close this up, hit refresh. So our get leads endpoint. So we're again logged out, I guess, because I hit refresh or the server restarted. But we can say Harry at Hogwarts.com. Password is just the password I created, authorized. So if you remember before, I already created the Bob the Builder lead for Harry. So what we can do now is try this out, execute, and we get back a list. And in my case, it's just one lead. So Bob the Builder. We go ahead and create another one. So if I go back to the post endpoint, try it out, say first name is Jeff, last name Bezos, email Jeff at Amazon.com, company Amazon, and then note talk about space travel, and then execute that. So now I've just created another lead, and then back in get leads, if I execute this again, I get back the first lead that I created, which is like Bob the Builder, and then the second one, which was Jeff Bezos. But yeah, so our get endpoint works. So for our list get endpoint, the next thing that we want to do is we want to add on top of our endpoint and create one which gets back a individual lead. So we can say app.get, and this will be again very similar to what we had before, leads, but then we'll take in like a ID. So we can say lead underscore ID, and we'll say we can just put in the status code. And then we can say async def get lead, and that's just to return an individual lead. And this again it will take in both these two. So let's just copy user and DB from get leads, paste that in. But the last thing it will take, the other thing it will take is the ID itself. So we need to give it an actual lead ID. So we can say lead underscore ID, and it has to match this, like the parameter that we put in with our endpoint URL, and that will be an integer. And then finally, we can just say pass. So yeah, now we need to go ahead back into services and create our get lead kind of function. But what we want to do first is, because we'll be creating an update and delete endpoint as well, we want to create like a helper function that will just return a lead based on a given ID. So the first thing I want to do is just say async def and then underscore lead underscore selector. So this is just a help function that we need in the future. So lead selector, and then this will take in I'm just going to paste this in because typing it out over and over can be a bit cumbersome. But now we can say, and actually the last thing is the lead ID, lead underscore ID, which is an integer. But now with this lead selector, we can first create a query. So we can say lead equals db.query. And what this will do is first query the models, the lead table, so models.lead, and then filter by the owner ID. So owner ID equals user.id, and then filter the models.lead.id to equal the ID that we passed in, so lead ID. And then finally, we just want to get the first object that comes from it. So it may be the case that it doesn't exist as well. So we can say if the lead is none, then we can just erase underscore FastAPI HTTP exception, and status code equals 404. And then detail, we can just say the message will be lead does not exist. Probably be a bit more explicit by saying lead by ID does not exist, but we can leave it at this. And then finally, we can just return, if the lead does exist, we can return lead. So to kind of just quickly go over this query that we wrote. So it queries the lead table. It filters it first by the owner that signed in. So first, it was basically saying, get me the leads that are by this user. And then from those leads, find the ID that matches the parameter that we pass in, which is lead underscore ID, and give me the first element from that. Otherwise, it will just return an array, a one element list basically of the lead, and this just saves it by just give me the first object. So now with our lead selector, we can go ahead and create our function. So we can say async and then get underscore lead, and this will take in the same parameters. We say that, and we can say lead equals await, as it's synchronous, lead selector. We can say the lead ID equals lead ID, the user equals the user, and the database equals the database. And then finally, we can just do return lead, return schemas dot lead dot from ORM, and then throw in lead. This from ORM function is definitely one of my favorites. But yeah, this will return our lead object, our lead schema object. So now back in main.py, we can go ahead and make use of the function that we just wrote. So we can just say return await services dot get lead, and the lead ID, user, and database. So if we head back, if I just hit refresh, I have to log in again. Harry@hogwarts.com. I should really look into how to not log out every time, but it's fine. But this get lead, what we can do is, let's first check. Let's see what leads we already have. So try out execute. So we have a lead with the ID of 1 and the lead of ID 2. So we can go ahead and use that. So we can say ID 1, execute, and we get Bob Builder. If I do ID 2, execute, we get Jeff Bezos. If I were to do something like ID 3, we get lead does not exist and a 404 error. 404 error along with the message lead does not exist. But yeah, so it's working fine. We could also test it with another user and then see if the same thing happens again. But you know, it's hopefully it should be fine. But yeah, so that's our get, so our detail get endpoint. The next one that we want to do is our delete. So we can do app.delete, and this will take API leads and then lead underscore ID. And the status code for that will just be a status code of 204, and then async delete lead. And this again will just take all of this. So let's just copy that, paste that in, and we can say pass for now. And just to save time, let's just copy this again and paste that again, and this will be our put, so our update. And we can just say update lead, and the status code for that will just be a 200. But yeah, that's just to save time. And if we head back now, refresh, we get our put and delete, so our update lead and delete lead. And yeah, let's focus first on the delete service. So back in services, what we want to do is create our function that will delete the lead. And this isn't this is a pretty simple function. So we can do delete underscore lead. And this again will take in a lead ID session, paste that in. And the first thing we can do is say lead equals await, and then lead selector, and then lead ID, the user, and the user and the database. And what we can just do is query lead dot delete. And yeah, so this returns back a object from the database, and then just commit that finally. And now that works. So back in main.py, we can go ahead and call that function. So with delete, we can just say await, and then services dot delete lead, pass in the lead ID, the user, and database session, and we can just return a message, which is message, and say successfully deleted, just like that. Oh, I put this in the update. Sorry, let's just remove that from update, as that'd be a very confusing API. Place that with pass, and then back in delete. Yeah, so that's the delete one. We can check that out in a second. I just want to first go ahead and finish off our endpoint. So create our update one. So this one will also take in so with update lead, we also want to pass in the lead object. So this will be the schema itself. So we can say schemas.lead create, as we'll just be passing in like the first name, last name, email, company, note, not like the date created or date last updated. That will be done, or that is done, or will be done separately on the server itself. So with update lead, back in services, we can go ahead and create our function. So we can say async define update underscore lead, and this will take in our lead ID. Let's just copy all this again. But also, apart from lead ID, we'll also take in the lead itself, which will be underscore schemas dot lead create. And what we can do is, first of all, we can call the lead selector function. So we can say lead from the database. We can say lead db equals await lead selector. We can pass in the lead ID. I think my computer is really slow right now. It's really hot, so sorry if there's a bit of lag. Just lead ID like that. User and the database. And then we can say lead underscore db. So this is a put request. It's not a patch or anything. So we'll just be updating the entire thing, as it's just yeah, it's fine just doing that, as it's a very small object anyway. So we can do not lead db. We can say dot first name equals the lead dot first name, and then no, what's wrong? It's just really slow. But yeah, anyway, usually may format that, but I don't think it's formatting because it's so slow. But anyway, I'm going off track. So db dot last name equals lead dot last name, and then lead dot db dot email equals lead dot email, leads underscore db dot company equals lead dot company, and then lead dot underscore db dot note equals lead dot note. And then finally, we just want to, like with our date last updated, which is in the models file. So our date last updated, we want to do that too, but this will be done on the server itself. So the first thing that we want to do is, if it hasn't been, no, it hasn't. So we just want to import date time as underscore dt. So back down here, we can say lead underscore db dot dates last updated, and we can just set that to underscore dt dot date time dot utc now. And then finally we can just commit that, so db dot commit and then db dot refresh on the lead db, and we can just return the object itself. So lead dot from ORM, and then pass in the lead underscore db, and that should be it. So if we head back to main.py, we can go ahead and call that. So in update lead, I'm so sorry that it's slow. I think it's just VS Code just eating up computer's memory. But we can just do await underscore services dot update lead, pass in the lead ID, the lead itself, the user and the database. And then, yeah, we could probably say the message. So let's just copy this, paste that in, and instead of successfully deleted, successfully updated. And that is it. So what we can do is if we head back to the browser and with our Swagger interface, let's just authorize ourselves, say Harry at Hogwarts.com, password, authorize. And now with our, so we can get a lead. So let's just try out again. So with ID 1, so we get Bob the Builder. And then if we were to update it, try it out with ID 1, so the Bob the Builder one. The first name is, let's say it's Bob the Builder. And let's just update the note. So what was our note for Bob the Builder? Call about new home. Email, I don't know, let's set something else. Bob at Gmail. So that two's changed. I think the other one was Bob Builder. Company. Let's say Apple. Let's just update a few things. Note, let's say talk about phone. Execute that. So we get this message successfully updated. And then if we actually, let me just zoom in. I don't think it's clear, but yeah, we get this successfully updated. And then if we go back to our API leads, lead ID, I'll get one, execute that again. So we get back the new Bob the Builder, the name is the same, the last name is the same, email has changed, the company has changed, and the note as well has changed, along with our date last updated. So we created this at 9, and then at 9:37, wow, this video has gone on for a while, but 9:37, we've updated it. But yeah, that works fine. And lastly, we can go ahead and check out our delete endpoint. So let's delete Bob the Builder. So the ID for that one was 1. Execute. Internal server error. Has no attribute delete. And that's because I was wondering why that didn't show up on the actual thing. I think what we want to do is do database dot delete and then the instance of lead like that. Maybe that should work. I don't know why I put lead. So wait, let's just try that again. Execute. Yeah, so that works fine. So we're getting a 204, and just to triple check or double check, we can go back to our get leads and then just try it out, execute, and we just get back the one, which is Jeff Bezos. But yeah, it works fine. So we deleted it and we updated it successfully. And that brings us to the end of this video. So we're able to, it's just the basic CRUD stuff, but also with user authentication in mind. So yeah, in the next video, we'll be looking at setting up the React app. So we'll be jumping into the front end, connecting and see how we can connect it up with the back end. And then, yeah, focusing primarily on React in the next few videos. But yeah, if you want to check out the source code for this video, the link is in the description. Also, there's a Discord channel, so if you want to pop by, say hello, the link too will be in the description. But other than that, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and stay healthy and safe. And I hope to see you in the next video.